Over the past 4 weeks, I have learned more about myself as an individual, a learner, and a teacher than I have in my 33 years of life and 12 years of teaching. I can see some of your faces now. I can see you looking at your neighbors. 4 weeks? Yes, 4 weeks. Ask yourself, when is the last time you were asked to do some true self-reflection? Maybe this is something you do regularly. If so, I commend you. If you can't answer this question, don't worry. Until now, I couldn't answer it either because as a full-time working mom of 2, I am lucky if I can get a moment to think, let alone self-reflect. Fortunately, I recently took a class about 4 different learning theories and practices that allowed for quite a bit of reflection. Talk about a blast from the past. I was transformed back to my undergrad classes when names or terms like Piaget, cognitive theory, Bloom's taxonomy, Gardner's multiple intelligence, and more were discussed. For many of you with years of teaching under your belt, these names may be in the back of your mind. But how often do you think about them in the hustle and bustle of day-to-day planning? I'll be honest, I rarely did. For others who recently graduated, these ideas are more familiar. If you are like me, and I'll explain what I mean in a few minutes, you probably had some type of teaching Bible when you entered your first year, that go-to book of tricks. Our first discussion was on learning styles. When we hear the term learning styles, many often think about students falling into 3 main categories: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, your hands-on learners. I started my teaching journey in a first grade classroom and can recall my preparation for those first parent-teacher conferences. I vividly remember sitting down with my mentor teacher in early November, and she was helping me go over some talking points, one being learning style. I prepared my notes, and based on my observations from those past 8 to 10 weeks, I labeled each of my students as best as I could: visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. So there I was. It was conference day. I shared my notes with the parents, many whose firstborn was in my room, so what else did they know? Provided some ways they could foster growth in said learning style, and off they went. Was I wrong in the label that I provided with these parents? I don't think so. Was I accurate with the information I just learned? Probably not. Our class focused on Anthony Gregoric's theory. Again, I see some of you nodding because the name sounds familiar. Well, it was a name that I hadn't thought about much in recent years, but believe me, I will be referencing it on a regular basis, and here's why. Do me a favor. Close your eyes and put yourself back into the student desk. Think about yourself as a learner in your favorite class with your favorite teacher. What was it about that class or teacher that made it so favorable? Now, if it was because there was little to no homework, think a bit deeper. Did you enjoy the way the material was presented? Did you learn through games versus paper and pencil activities? Was your teacher carefree or rigid? Now keep those thoughts in mind. I said I would explain the "like me" comment. Well, as a learner and an individual, I am someone that needs clear sets of instructions and answers to every question. I was not a fan of open-ended questions. I was a rule follower, and you better believe I need a rubric or a checklist to guide me through an assignment. I am a logical, detail-oriented, organized planner. So if you're smiling or nodding, I completely understand you. There was no doubt in my mind where I would fall on Gregoric's style delineator. According to Gregoric, there are 4 styles: concrete sequentials, concrete random, abstract sequential, and abstract random. We all have a natural style, which is part of our true self. But through our discussions, I learned that as we grow both as learners and individuals, we are able to adapt and may show other learning style traits, but we always have that true preference. This leads me back to those first year of conferences. I labeled those students, but now understand that he or she may have preferred to learn that way, but he and she was not limited to that label and did have the ability to learn in other ways. Well, based on my description above, it was not a surprise when I came back as a concrete sequential. But what I didn't realize was that my score of 35 would consider me a case study for Gregoric. He would want to study me. I guess that explains why I can't walk into a room without fixing a crooked picture, or why I get so much satisfaction out of completing tasks for my to-do list that I will write something down that wasn't there just so I can cross it off. If you're wondering what learning style you may be, let me give you some various characters to think about. If you find yourself shaking your head or smiling while thinking of this character, well, you might just be like them. If I could channel Jeff Foxworthy now, if you think of Monica Geller from Friends, you might be a concrete sequential. If you can picture Kramer from Seinfeld, you might be a concrete random. If you compare yourself to Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, you might be an abstract sequential. And finally, if you can relate to Dharma from Dharma and Greg, you might be an abstract random. So if you take the time to review the traits of Gregoric's learning styles, you will probably ask yourself, why am I standing here presenting you with a TED Talk? Well, I did a lot of self-reflecting after these discussions. To better myself as a teacher, I need to step outside of my comfort zone, present you material in a variety of ways so that different learning styles within my room have a chance to receive the information in a way that will benefit them and add to their successes. Next up, the brain. How many people in this room are comfortable turning to their neighbor to discuss the parts and functions of the brain? Before learning about brain-based theories, I wasn't. I'm not an expert, I'm not even close, but I have a better understanding of why my students may or may not understand material and why he or she may act the way they do. Without getting too technical and having you feel overwhelmed, brain research has been around for years. Dating back to the 70s, we had various images or scans of the brain developed, like your MRIs, your CAT scans, your PET scans, to the 80s with Gardner's introduction of multiple intelligences. The 90s became known as the decade of the brain, and we had researchers like Kane and Kane that developed the 12 principles of mind learning. They focused on sensory experience of learning with differentiated instructional methods that allowed for practical applications and feedback. Jensen's model focused on the before, the during, and the after approaches to a lesson. Currently, universal design for learning is the big push. Research shows that the way people learn is as unique as fingerprints. So, can we as teachers minimize those barriers and maximize learning for all students? If you ever have the chance to read How the Brain Learns by David Sousa, I highly recommend it. He starts off his book with brain-based facts and hits you hard with terminology that could totally overwhelm you. But let me break down some of what I felt was important and left an impression moving forward in my career. First, we as teachers need to engage as many lobes of the brain as possible. When more lobes are engaged, students have a better chance of retention. For me, the limbic system provided a lot of information as to why and how my students react. For example, the hypothalamus monitors our internal systems and helps keep our bodies in homeostasis. When our students don't come in with a good night's sleep or a nutrient-rich breakfast, their bodies could be off balance, making it hard for cognitive processing to take place. The hippocampus is essential in creating meaning and taking our working memory and converting it to long-term storage. Finally, the amygdala plays a crucial role in emotions. Depending on the age of our students, emotions can be all over the place. We can provide our students with a safe learning environment so that the amygdala doesn't go into fight or flight mode. Which makes me think of something a professor once told us. Teachers are like 911 dispatchers. Dispatchers listen to the caller on the other line and determine the problem. They keep the caller calm and provide steps for the caller to take until a rescue service arrives. Teachers are the first ones to determine the needs of their students. We encourage the student to work through problems by providing the necessary steps and resources, all while letting them know it will be okay. According to research, brain breaks have been proven to increase learning. Offering a brief period of exercise or activity increases oxygen levels and blood flow to the brain, which increases the likelihood of retention. Giving students a break from that cognitive demand will increase dopamine levels, making students feel good, which also increases learning and understanding. This is something I always did with my first graders, but it never crossed my mind to do it with my older students. Now, after being reminded of the importance, I have begun to do it with my middle school students. I have also shared this information with my colleagues, some of who have now begun to implement those breaks. The last two theories we discussed were emotional intelligence and culturally relevant pedagogy. I felt these two theories went hand in hand because they both involve a good amount of self-reflection and personal understanding. First, the emotional intelligence theory, according to Daniel Goleman, is made up of 4 domains: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. So, is there a shock to anyone that we should be teaching more than just academics in school? Can we agree that we need to do more? Students need to be taught how to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve their goals, show empathy, maintain healthy relationships, and make responsible decisions. There are a variety of support tools and programs available for schools to put into place. Just as we want our students to learn these skills, we as teachers need to model them. I have always been a big proponent of teaching to the whole child, and this class has given me information rooted in research as to why it is so valuable to put these programs in place. Daniel Goleman also makes an interesting connection between your IQ, the intelligence, and your EQ, emotional intelligence. He states that IQ will get you the job, while EQ will get you the promotion. Again, IQ, your GPA, your test scores, your resume info, will get your foot in the door. But EQ, your ability to build relationships, network, show empathy, will help you climb the ladder to success. Alfie Kohn said, "We can't value only what is easy to measure. Measurable outcomes may be the least important results of learning." Think about that. If we as educators are trying to teach the whole child, why do we put the most importance on the test scores and the data? We are not bad teachers because of this. Most of us are simply just focusing on what is mandated by our districts. Teachers have a million demands, and to think about making room for one more thing could be daunting. But if we just shifted our thinking to allow room for social and emotional growth, we could easily utilize those teachable moments and the day-to-day happenings in our classrooms. Similar to EQ, culturally relevant pedagogy is not something we as teachers can measure. It is an area that we receive little to no training on, but yet it can have such an impact on our students. Overall, this theory was the one that left me with the most questions. First, what does culture even mean? Culture can mean a variety of things to different people. For the purpose of continuity, we will use the definition I was presented in class. Culture is a set of practices and beliefs that is shared with members of a particular group and that distinguishes one group from another. Some examples of cultures could be your Polish Americans, your Down syndrome community, or even your New Kids on the Block fans. More often than not, we base our understanding of culture on what is visible at the surface level, like your explicit items such as race, gender, and clothing. Yet if we dig deeper, we would uncover so much of the implicit items like beliefs and morals and attitudes that make our students who they truly are. To better understand the effects of culture, Dr. Latsing-Billings conducted a study to determine the qualities that made someone a successful teacher of African American students. Her goal was to put out a list of the teaching strategies one needed to possess to be successful. But she could find no commonalities. But was there really no answer? Dr. Latsing-Billings was able to provide us with examples of what good teaching looked like, while keeping the aspect of culture at the forefront of our minds. When we as teachers have students of minority groups in our classroom, we need to be aware of our unconscious bias. Every person tends to favor different aspects of culture, such as race, gender, orientation, without awareness. We need to know that these biases exist and make an even bigger effort to truly know our students and understand where they come from. We are not bad people for having these biases. In fact, most of us overestimate our cultural competence because we believe that we have a solid understanding of these cultures. In order to grow, learn, and understand cultural differences, we need to first know about ourselves. We must truly understand what culture or cultures we identify with and what those biases are. If we do not self-reflect and take the time to know our preferences, we may blindly offend someone. If that happens, we must take responsibility and make amends. We must avoid stereotyping or allowing one person of a culture to speak for an entire group, because within each culture, everyone is different. Getting to know your students is an authentic way to learn about other cultures. Bring this knowledge into the classroom to create a safe, relatable space for learning. Get involved. There are so many programs out there where we can fully immerse ourselves into the groups. When life settles a bit, I plan to join Big Sister program. Remember, I'm a concrete sequential, so thinking outside the box and being out of my comfort zone isn't easy, but I know it's necessary for me to continue to grow. Someone once said, life as a teacher begins the day you realize you will always be a learner. I encourage you to never stop learning. The past is over, so learn from it and make changes. Never doubt that you are changing the lives of young minds that you come into contact with each day. Thank you.